Why are we faced with these same problems again and again? Why do they never end? Because, ladies and gentlemen, ultimately the problem is not an economic problem so much as it is the problem of white domination of African people. That's the issue. This is the reason why I tell people you must study the psychology of domination even before you study the psychology of racism. Understand that. I had one young man who's so happy he's at NYU. He said, oh, I'm learning so much, and I'm so happy. I'm in this class in economics. You know, I said, well, now, why are you in that class? And they're doing all these circles and curves and, you know, cost and all these kind of figures, which Negroes think are magic signs for making money. You see, so they think if they learn all this voodoo, that they're going to come out and be like the white folk. But remind that professor that the American economy is not ultimately based on the management skills of American management. It's not based on the organization of American corporations. What ultimately is it based on? Upon the murdering of Indians and the stealing of their lands. So that the economic course essentially is a course in how the booty is going to be divided among American people. It all goes over what? Gold and salt, and who won, and over trade routes and other things. And people went to war and took those things from one and another. And those who gained control over them then built empires and nations and so forth as a basis of that. Not just studying economics 101 and business administration. But you got to learn real history. You got to learn a history that goes beyond just the celebration of African heroes and the celebration of African culture. And he shifts his visions and is not afraid to change his mind and go against his prior opinions, when that reality suggests that those opinions were wrong. You have to wake up. You cannot let any leader become a sacred cow to the point where you forget how to perform a realistic analysis on the situation. Because ultimately it is your individual lives and the life of our people that is at question here, not the glory and power of an individual person or leader, but of the people themselves. I think we are in a better position at this point because, unlike Du Bois and Washington and the others who were, in a sense, at the front end of these issues, we have had now 80, 90 years to see what happened. We can measure results. Therefore, we can take an empirical approach, an empirical analysis, an analysis based on experiment, an analysis based on actual experience, and look at the results. That looks at the programs of other leaders and look at the results that they wrought. So we don't have to guess, and we don't have to be quite as theoretical as we used to be. We can say, let's see what the results bear out. And let's see if this form of leadership can be justified any longer based on its results. And this is what we have to measure.
Peace, everyone. Welcome back to another conversation. Where are they now? Blueprint for Black Power. I'm joined by my brother Diallo. And as I told y'all, we will get into episode 2, where we will follow this preacher, a preacher-preneur per se. And before I even let Diallo go, what I want to do is, as we started off, we hear that clip, and then we read the first paragraph in chapter 27, and then let Diallo respond to what he heard in the audio, and then also what he thought of when he heard this in chapter 27. So, open your Bibles, turn to Second Thessalonians. No, I'm just joking. Turn to 704 Charlotte. Shout out to Charlotte. 704, chapter 27. At the beginning, it says financing Black economic development, beginning with this chapter through chapter 30, We will suggest and describe numbers of ways an African American and Pan-African economic system may be financed by initiatives set forth and controlled by the African American and Pan-African community itself. These suggestions are not exhaustive in breadth or depth. They are not written with the expertise of a professionally trained and experienced economist. Their main purpose is to stimulate and focus discourse in the African community regarding the means of financing its economic development and enhancing its economic well-being and political economic power. More than merely catalyzing discourse, we hope the corrections and refinements, as well as the creative approaches and our suggestions, might move others to serve as platforms for community actions that will lead to tangible, positive results. So, Bro Diallo, you read that, I'm pretty sure, multiple times.
Yeah.
And you heard what he said in the audio. As we get into this, what are some general thoughts about what he said and also that piece?
Well, that was from chapter 27. But if we look at the book Blueprint from Black Power, the first chapters are about ideology, consciousness, and policy. So the mind, the mentality, the understanding, the outlook and insights of Africans came way before, because if you ain't got that together, you could literally give a fool a pot of gold and he's going to lap the block a couple of times and give it right back to you. So in my understanding, I don't really like this term, economic development, because it's been so corrupted. And we begin to have other, fallacious concepts like economic liberation, economic empowerment. And we like to slap the term economic on that because we believe that if we are Black people pursuing these things and we slap economic in front of it, it will relieve us from having to engage in, military, ideological, cultural, social, as if we can laser focus or orient ourselves as economic people, individuals, or a group, and it will relieve us from all the other things that we are required to do. So I don't like economic development. I like development, cultivation, liberation, empowerment without the prefix now of economic or financial, because now when I hear that, I immediately start to think that it's a con. Essentially, it's a hustle, and I know that the ancestor Amos Wilson didn't articulate that in that way, but as we evolve, as this book is literally decades old now, and we begin to expand on what our ancestors, not necessarily, as you jokingly said, it's not a Bible. He even said, this is a framework to provoke a discussion and to provoke understanding that economics is, as he stated, more of a cult now. We have a cult of the entrepreneur in our community. We have a cult of capitalism in our community as Black people get greater and greater access to what I call the spoils of empire, the spoils of conquest, as we're allowed greater participation in the spoils of imperialism. We tend to lose sight of what our ultimate goal should be, which is liberation, and we tend to become as corrupt. And I'll finish with saying, which we didn't seem to understand, seeking or securing equality with your oppressor makes you equal with your oppressor. Right. And we think that we can get the shit they got without getting the shit they got. We can get their material wealth without their psychological pathology. Right. We can get their material wealth without deteriorating ourselves or making ourselves subhuman. Or as Woman Woonoff, when she was a member of the active in the civil rights movement, a white man said, so, as a Negro, what are you fighting for? Do you want equality with the white man? And Wilma Rudolph said, no, because I don't want to stoop that low. I don't want to degrade myself to be equal with the white man. And I think, we seem to see that in culture, but economically, it's the same hustle. You're going to have to destroy as many ecosystems and engage in as much slave labor and hyper exploitation to get your Bentley as the white man did.
Absolutely.
So I don't know how this became a just and noble pursuit within the conscious community or the cultural community.
Right. So one of the things that Amos said in that clip, when he said we had like 30 years to see what Du Bois or study and see what Du Bois said was correct or wrong. Well, it's unique because again, when people study Du Bois, sometimes they really study one piece of him or use one piece instead of like how he ended.
We do that to everybody, yeah.
Yeah, but even today we have like almost 29 to 30 years from when he wrote this book. I know it was published in 98, but and we get to see if some of these suggestions work, right? So again, this takes us to Reverend Adams from Hartford Memorial Baptist Church on page 569. So were there anything, again, I know economic development is something that's a buzzword and triggering to me as well, but was there anything in page 569 that stood out to you? And obviously people in the comments too, anything that stood out to you, type it in the chat.
Yes.
But go ahead and start with what stood out to you and what kind of made you wanted to respond or deal with it.
One thing that Amos Wilson put in the second sentence, where he was basically lauding the achievements of Hartford Memorial Baptist Church. He said most members of Hartford Memorial Baptist Church on Detroit's northwest side aren't on welfare. In fact, many are doctors, lawyers, accountants, and teachers. Hartford's pastor, Reverend Charles Adams, was confronted by a challenge different from the one that faced Bishop Edwards. A decade ago, his sprawling church was surrounded by bottle-strewn dirt lots and abandoned buildings, drug houses, and lots of growing grass. That's the first paragraph. What I want to first speak to, where he said, in fact, there are many doctors, lawyers, accountants, and teachers. As to say, this is a community or a church that is atypical of most churches, not just in Detroit, a Detroit neighborhood or the city of Detroit or the state of Michigan, but throughout Black America. But Amos Wilson is also on record demonstrating that his research, in his own words, I quote, Amos Wilson said, Black people's achievement and securing of titles and status within this system is inversely proportional to our collective progress, which means Amos Wilson, I quote, said, the more Black doctors we get, the more Black people suffer from chronic diseases and maltreatment within healthcare facilities. He said the more Black lawyers and Black judges and Black police officers and Black prosecutors that are appointed or elected or applied to certain positions, he said the more rapid our incarceration rates go up and the more insidious the abuse we suffer within the system. As we have more Black MBAs now than at any other time in Black history in the West, we have fewer Black businesses that are struggling more, that have less capitalization. The same thing for accountants. So whenever you look at any profession across the board, or as Steve Coakley called them, oath takers, if you get to a certain position, you get a certain level of schooling, you have to take oaths to get certain titles. Or license, or even little certificates. They make you sign these documents, and they have the rituals associated. So he called a lot of these Black people oath takers. Obama had to take his oath of office. If you take the bar exam and you become a lawyer and a licensed lawyer, or if you as oath takers, if you look across the board, as Black individuals rise up in these positions, Black collectives suffer under those spaces where Black people have status and positions within. One of the key, with Justice Brown Jackson, he also talked about, all this is from Amos Wilson's research and assertions. Thurgood Marshall, the first Black justice who paved the way, the man who walked so Clarence Thomas could run. In fact, Clarence Thomas is literally sitting in his seat. He said that Thurgood Marshall had more success as a lawyer arguing in front of the Supreme Court than he had as a justice sitting on the Supreme Court. And his tenure spanned the Reagan Revolution. His tenure, and as Bobby Wright said, the 80s was the era where white people regrouped and wiped us out. And what he meant by that is the 80s was the era where the white people finally regrouped and came up with a structured, dynamic, and effective plan to undermine all of the successes of the so-called civil rights reforms and civil rights era. He said that in his tenure on the bench, the Ronald Reagan Revolution, he sat and watched all the successes that he had secured as a civil rights NAACP lawyer be whittled away and eliminated while he sat on the bench. So his personal achievement is marked by our collective downfall. And then the icing on the cake is when he died while George Bush was in office, Clarence Thomas took his seat. And so the fact that Dr. Amos Wilson said, well, we got this church full of Black professionals,
right,
who moved into a space that was blighted and came with these dynamic changes. The Amos Wilson told us that we really, these hidden figures, these achieving Black, excellent Black folks, historically, there's some other books,
right,
like this book right here.
Oh yeah.
Said that that is nothing for, we should take caution when wealthy Black people, when professional oath-taking Black people turn their attention to the Black masses. That's not a cause for rejoicing,
right?
You know.
So one of the things that initially, so I think he was able to grow his congregation to 10,000 people.
Mega church.
Yeah, a mega church. Now, like you, I did see that. I'm like, well, okay. So now we're talking about the bourgeois people. They got enough money or whatever the case may be in that zip code. So one of the first things that I was looking at was, okay, again, I know it's 2022 now, but I said, let's see what that zip code looked like, right?
Yeah.
Not only that, but let's see what the city looked like. I mean, right now, Detroit is the leading city out of the poorest city in the whole country. I think the last stats that I checked, I mean, it might be updated. And then out of that zip code, it's 125 of the poorest zip codes in the whole state. And this zip code that church is in is 23rd poorest. So again, when you looked at it, did you dive into any stats to see, okay, if it was thriving then, is the city and the zip code thriving now? The church is still there. They still right there today. And the pastor that we are talking about, his son took over. So right. When you looked into the stats, did you see anything that kind of stuck out to be like?
What stuck out to me mostly is that most of the economic development is attributed to gentrification and the displacement of Black people. So it seems like Black people started building it up just to be replaced, which happens a lot. Black people go build gardens and get rid of blight and repair it, and it's displacement. It's still predominantly Black, but it's the Black community is being displaced by gentrification. Right. And in reality, you know, we think of gentrification as an exclusively white people displacing Black, but it's also affluent Blacks displacing. Like DC, many of the gentrifiers were affluent Black people kicking out, you know, working class and poor Blacks. So it seems that it basically, I wouldn't call it development, I call it pacification. Mm-hmm. When they come in and say, well, we're going to make things better for you, to pacify you, to make you comfortable. That's what who called it that? Dale Jones called that loosening up to get a tighter grip, where the fundamental systems and power dynamics and hierarchies don't change, but they do give some level of relief or have some concessions for the people who are active. Right. And then once the concessions quells the activism, they come back with even more draconian repression that was even greater than what provoked the initial wave of activism. So in the 48235 zip code in Detroit, you know, the median income is slightly higher, the poverty level is slightly lower, but ultimately what's happening there is the same thing that's happening in my community. that when I moved here was predominantly black. Every demographic is increasing there except for black. Black is steadily going down, and the blacks are moving out to the suburbs and other non-economically viable areas because it's more affordable for them.
Right. I want to shout out to the Bart and Bill think tank research team for giving us a bunch of rabbit holes for you to go down. So in the show notes, you can see all of the links to everything that we're covering today and other things that you might want to dive into.
So yeah, I got so many windows open. I'm scared it's going to crash my computer. I got all this data here.
Yeah, I had to close some of my windows down too. So initially, I want you to see this. So there's one point, right? They talked about, he brought in the partnerships with Ford and GM and so on and so forth. This one article, man, was bugging me out because, again, it made it sound like he was doing something so powerful, but the reality is, like, you remember you said that they got doctors and lawyers and all that shit there, right?
Yeah.
So he supposedly partnered up with GM, right? And the article says, this is 2010, going to church to sell cars. But through the whole thing, you will see stuff like the GM minority suppliers and dealers. They're big into the industry, and we're celebrating them. Reverend Charles Adams, pastor of 10,000 member Hartford Baptist Church. This is a wonderful opportunity to do something really special for Hartford church members. Something that has never been done before, right? So again, it's like this community good day, beautiful day, but he's actually really trying not to sell it as like his audience or his church congregation is about to get sold to. Here's a couple of things that stuck out to me. Like one of the things when I think the article was talking about, people will be on deck. They're not going to pressure you into sales, but they'll be on deck to check your seatbelts and see if they're working okay and all these other things. But today we was on Black Power Media, and the elder said preachers, his dad always told him preachers, it's a thin line between preacher and pimping. When you look at this, do you think that this pastor, right, that Amos suggests, was pimping out his 10,000 member to GM and getting some coins from it? How do you process this article?
Well, I wouldn't say it was pimping per se. It's what's called a quid pro quo. This was back in 2010. Remember, there was actually back then, this is finance capitalism. It's kind of like a complex rabbit hole. GM, Ford Motor Company, around the turn of the last century, in the late 1990s and the early, we went into a stage that is called finance capitalism. Prior to that, we had what was called industrial capitalism. Industrial capitalism is where all throughout America, you had these giant manufacturing hubs. You had these areas where whole towns were centered around production, steel productions. Most TVs were made in America, Panasonic and all that, Zenith. Refrigerators were made in the United States. All this industry was happening in the United States during what we mentioned, Reaganomics and the Reagan era, due to trade reforms, China securing most favored trade nation, and the advent of computer of supercomputers and super processing, where you can manufacture across the globe and align all these various these complex systems to manufacture, ship, process, distribute. Anyway, we went into what is called finance capitalism. All the factories were shipped overseas, most of them, by and large. Many of the factories, much of the production, most of the processing of the raw materials was shipped out of the United States to take advantage of lax environmental laws, take advantage of absent labor unions and absent labor standards, to take advantage of the absence of minimum wage regulations and all that shit. So at that time, Ford Motor Company and GM were making more money off of financing cars than they were manufacturing and selling cars. They literally became financiers or banks. And they got in trouble because they were doing discriminatory practices, like all financial services in the United States, got in trouble for discriminatory practices. So what happens when a racist company gets caught doing its racism? They go on what is a PR campaign. So they wanted to find Black institutions and prominent Black individuals to reform, just like, you know, Disney right now is having issues because they financed the Don't Say Gay bill in Disney. So you're going to see a lot of prominent representatives or members of the gay community or the LGBTQ plus community are going to be getting a lot of interactions with Disney, you know. And so that's back then in 2010. Ford Motor Company was like, listen, you give us some Black faces, allow some of our representatives and allow us to stamp the Ford label. And Ford was a race purist. The founder of Ford was a Nazi. He received the highest honor a non-German citizen could receive from the Nazi Party. He financed the Nazi Party. Much of his internal combustion engine and a lot of his technological development was given to the Russian, the Nazi German military. So he's a Nazi. It's a Nazi company. So for years, Ford Motor Company became masters at reforming their image. So all that to say is they were caught mistreating Black consumers, and they needed some good PR, and they needed some partnerships with Black institutions. And so it was a quid pro quo. It was more of an exchange, more so than the pastor just, you know, offering up his congregation. So it was a back and forth, but it was still insidious. But it even goes beyond just basic pimping. It's what's called whitewashing or blackwashing. It was trying to help Ford reform and shape his image, because, you know, Detroit, that's Motor City. A lot of the Black middle class came out of those Ford factories before they got shipped to Mexico and the maquiladoras and all that shit. So Ford has always had a relationship with the leading Blacks or the Black bourgeoisie that goes back generations. So I would call it a quid pro quo relationship more so than a pimping relationship, because that would denote that the Negroes, the bourgeoisie Negroes, were victims or being exploited, when they were more. It was an unequal partnership, but still a partnership nonetheless.
Right. So I can anticipate your answer to this, because I don't know, over the years, we probably had multiple conversations about the Black church. And so in this particular church, right? So before this guy was the pastor, there was another pastor. And I mean, I might be, let me make sure that I'm pulling the right one. What is this? Oh, yeah. I might be reading into this, but to me, it seems like, because there was this history thing of like, oh, this church was radical, and I'm not radical, but this church had real history and stake, and they helped with worker organizing. And you will see, like, the pastor before actually worked with organizing. So somewhere down here in the 30s and 40s, he says he opened Hartford pulpit to such nonconformists as W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, whatever. So you kind of went from this kind of pastor to maybe a Black capitalist, opportunist, economic development pastor. So initially, I guess I would want to ask, like, what do you think positively for the struggle that the church could do? Given that you think that they had at one point been useful. So what today do you think they can do, especially in the context of, okay, you had one pastor that seems like, you know, he was all right, then now you have this pastor who's totally different.
I've said white people burning Black churches is racism. Black people burning Black churches is revolution. So the best thing these churches could do is shut the fuck down, you know, across the world, and stop infecting our African minds with Judeo-Christian theology. That's the short answer. As far as what churches, there's a old saying in the movement, you know, the man a man doesn't make the time makes the man. So you had a lot of churches during the era of civil rights, during the era of Black uprising, get on board with that. And the church is an institution that serves the state and serves conditions. Church, the way that you find, because from the founding of Christianity, Islam, there was a time where these religions were little cults under duress. You know, when Christianity came up, there were several different, not just religions, but even several different sects of Christianity. Like, why is Protestantism so powerful in the United States versus Catholicism being so powerful in Italy? Why is Mormonism so powerful in Utah? So what churches tend to do is find out who are the movers and shakers and the powerful people in that time and era, and they get on board with them. And another thing about churches is they quickly jump off board. It used to be a time where white races would burn down Catholic churches and monasteries. So in the time, I don't really give the church props for saying, well, back in the 30s and during the civil rights era, the prominent Negroes at that time were allowed to come there and talk, because churches always tend to go, they don't go with God. They go with who's in power or who's got the biggest voice or who is the biggest draw at that time. So, you know, even though I'm a great admirer of Paul Robeson, I'm even lesser admirer of W.B. Du Bois. He was one of the most prominent singer actors at the time, and Du Bois was the most prominent professor at that time. It wasn't a big risk bringing these prominent Negroes on. I mean, the same thing, those Negroes were also in Harvard and getting degrees from Harvard, and Paul Robeson was showing up on major broadcast television, even though he was controversial. So, you know, I'm pretty sure once the PNAC got after him, and once he was denounced as a communist, and the PNAC and McCarthyism started in on him, I'm sure they wouldn't have had him in there. So I don't give props for that. I don't think that the church was ever radical. Christianity cannot be radical. It can't be. You know, we had a discussion before about liberation theology, which is contradiction in terms, because the liberation is the most limiting, oppressive thing in the world. I mean, if you try to live your life biblically, you couldn't do shit. You can't, you know, you can't move, you can't have sex. You can't. So all that to say is, I don't think it was radical back then. I don't think that radicalism or liberation will come out of the church. And, you know, as I said before, most of the religious figures that we associate with revolution and empowerment and resistance are people who were not in good standing with their church when it happened. Right. Dr. King was not in good standing with the Baptist Convention, the Southern Baptist Convention. And many ministers denounced him. You know, the fundamental, you know, there is a contradiction between liberation and salvation. Salvation cancels out liberation. You know, if you believe that salvation, that there is an ultimate supernatural force that is going to answer your conditions and correct your conditions, then it makes liberation and the what liberation requires of us moot. It makes it a waste of goddamn time. You know.
But tell me this. So obviously we know that, again, when we have these conversations, we talk about the reality of our people. Like, if 80% of these Black American, Africans in America identify as Christian, we know people are emotionally connected to it. Yeah. So in this other space, right? How would you advise we practice some kind of political education for these people, right? Again, because what God is telling you, it seems to be always supporting imperialism, capitalism, and so forth. Like, for instance, this pastor, again, that Dr. Amos suggests, said God used humans as agents to usher in the day of racial and class equality in this world, right? And so he focused much of his social action in the area of economic empowerment. Again, we already had this conversation. Now, we're going to get into this shit with McDonald's and stuff. But so are you telling me God called you to take this land, right? That, again, it says his Northwest Detroit neighborhood was devastated by declining financial conditions. So God is not really a political scientist at this point. He's not really telling the truth about power dynamics. But he or she called you to get this land for cheap. That's you probably got through foreclosure, which we're gonna talk in a second. Get this land for cheap and put some McDonald's and KFCs on it. Like, how do you begin to disabuse people from? So God ain't calling you to actually to maintain exploitation and these other things. And sure as hell ain't telling you to help black franchisee get McDonald's and shit. But go ahead.
Well, when I was looking at their relationship to KFC and McDonald's franchising, first thing I look up, or first thing that came to my mind, were black chronic health disease. When you look up African Americans in the CDC and you look up the top 10 causes of premature death in African Americans, of the top 10, 6 of them are related to diet. Cancers, heart disease, cardiovascular, cerebral, kidney failure. The vast majority, aside from suicide, homicide, and accidents, mainly vehicular or on work accidents, all of the shit that's killing us is our food, and our dietary habits. And it's also known that poor people consume more fast food than affluent people, and black people are more impoverished than the average white person. So black people as a demographic consume more fast food by and large above and beyond most other demographics. So this shit is killing us. But what I want to say about this whole where, it's like, well, most of our people believe in God. Most of our people follow God. So if you're going to do anything, I've been told this all my life. And at one point, I believed it until I tried to enact it. You're going to have to go through the church if you want to get anything done with black people. But in my notes from looking over the information you sent me, I said, you can't liberate a people by grafting onto their indoctrination. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. I wish it were that easy. I wish I could be like, I went to bed last night and Jesus visited me in the dream and I saw the ship of Zion on the horizon and I've been called to speak the gospel of the Lord. And then when I get in the pulpit, I get up and tell black folks, okay, we're going to make revolution. We're going to do Pan-African revolution and communal socialist economics. And black people would all follow me that way because I'm speaking through God. I wish it was that simple. I have no problem getting up telling them lies if, for the greater good. But that's not how it works. You can't graft onto or try to take advantage of black people's indoctrination. We have to challenge and fight, beat down and purge our people's indoctrination.
Right.
In order to liberate us. Because all you're doing is finding another way to exploit our people. Whether you got them praising Jesus or praising Allah or saying that you are the living manifestation of God, like Dr. York, or saying, God appeared to you in the form of Master Farad. You can't just come tell these religious lies to African people to mobilize them to do good, because we see each and every time, this example and every other example, that it eventually, the menticide, the psychological maladaptation and dysfunction and the madness is going to eventually erode anything you claim you built. It is a very, very, very weak foundation.
Listen, before we dig into McDonald's and the franchise as an economic option for black people, I heard you mention about Master Farad. Could you respond to Brother Sharif? It says, I think we need pillars akin to Islam that help regular black people connect to radical revolutionary messages.
I think that has been proven fake, and it's we don't need pillars akin to Islam. That Islam, and every time black people have, let me say it this way, I'll try to keep it short. Islam is icing on a cake called Arab nationalism. Islam is icing on a cake called Arab nationalism. So if you are engaged in Islam, you are engaged in Arab nationalism. And I don't care how much you try to Africanize it, how much you say this nonsense about Islam being a true black man's religion. Everywhere we look, the only people who have been able to build a power base and advance themselves and impose themselves from an Islamic point of view are Arabs and Persians. Even and the majority of Muslims are Asian, not even black. Indonesia is the most populous Islamic country in the world. And they are not Arab or Persian, they are Asian people. You know, and these terms get befuddled, but you feel me. They're not an Arabic or Persian culture. They're not from the, and look at the Uyghurs in China. So when you look at Islamic power, you're looking at Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, you're looking at Iran to a degree, you look at Libya, you look at Egypt. But when you look at it, black people who embrace Islam, it does not empower us. It just makes us subservient. It's an alien culture. It's an alien theology. It's an alien belief system. And as Dr. John Henry Clark told us, you follow another people's religion, you are the theological and spiritual slave of those people. And there's plenty of African gods, so much African folklore, so much African folklore, African mythology, African rituals, African systems of spiritual attainment out there that it is irrational. And there is no excuse for Africans who are trying to cultivate their spiritual selves or commune with higher powers or connect to the supernatural for any African anywhere in the world to follow any other theological system other than those that are, number one, rooted in Africa, came out of Africa, still grounded in Africa, and have no history of imperialism, colonization, or disrespect of African people and culture.
I think Sharif now has changed, but clarify what he said. And it sounds like he's advocating for Bobby rights. We need to develop a social theory. I'm not sure, but we'll get into that. So
and then we don't have to use the word Islam.
Islam or
we don't have to use the word, the concepts, the rhetoric. Let's just leave it alone.
Right. So for the people coming in, welcome. We're still going live. Leah, peace to you. And if you're not watching live anymore, you're rewatching it later on, peace to you as well. You can continuously engage with us. We will have space for questions and conversations and dialogue as I pull people on the screen too. Now, I keep seeing this all the time, and I know you hear and see it all the time. But San Juan Malo or whatever, I urge you, if you have time, to actually, I will send you the link and you can come on to clarify this question so we can dive into it. Because it's always like, what's the solution? And a proper critique includes solutions or recommendations. So even before we get into that, we should get into that. If you can come on, let me know. I will send you the link so you can come on and you can actually clarify that question and we can actually vibe out with it rather than do it from the chats. Because I mean, it's almost like, anyway. So one of the things that is important for us as we look through these, where are they now, right? So where are they now? We look at all these economic advices and people and examples that Dr. Amos gave, and we just follow them. And so we talked about buying some land and putting the biggest franchise in the world there, ran by Black franchisee. So you talked about this lawsuit. I seen a lawsuit. If y'all did some homework and went through the show notes before, you probably saw this lawsuit. So when you have a place like McDonald's, who supposedly helping Black people out, right? Because I know you've seen the commercials. They claim to put more Black millionaires out, right? And so, after the George Floyd situation and Breonna Taylor and these things, they putting out words that we do not tolerate inequality, injustice, racism, and so forth. But they're in a whole ass lawsuit with a bunch of Black franchise. These are all the Black franchise people that they're in lawsuit with. And I told Diallo before we went live, one of the brothers died, and on his obituary, I think it's in the show notes, in his obituary, he has donate the money to the Ronald McDonald House. I'm like, this is beyond me. But again, we're gonna keep getting into it. I'm gonna share a book with y'all that a sister wrote about this whole thing, and she killing it. And I got the free PDF if you want. I can send it to you. Let me know. But Diallo, your thoughts about McDonald as the meal ticket for Black liberation, economic development, power, whatever the hell we calling it. You said that your McDonald people in Chicago got a little bit of power, but when you see this, what's your thoughts?
You mean the law? Well, the lawsuit was settled last year. They got a grip, and McDonald said, "Okay, no more racism from 2021 forward. Racism done. We promise." But yeah, these Black franchise owners, like I said, when I start to think about McDonald's, I think about chronic health disease. I think about Black obesity rates, Black diabetes, amputation, other complications from chronic disease such as blindness, kidney failure, neurological diseases, early onset dementia and Alzheimer's and strokes, you know, lymphedema, respiratory illnesses, metastatic cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, even respiratory cancers, all related to eating fast food. So whatever money any Black individual is making off of McDonald's or a McDonald's franchise, it pales in comparison to the health impacts. We make millions off of McDonald's franchises, and we lose trillions of dollars in healthcare costs and loss in labor and premature death and stress in our community. So it's a zero sum, it's a losing game. But the whole franchise, the promise of the franchise, and you can't really innovate with the franchise. You know what I'm saying? When you buy into a franchise, you're buying into a model. You're basically buying trademarks and an operation model. So franchise owners, Black franchise owners, are pretty much cancel themselves out. If you are an economic or entrepreneurial Black genius and you buy a fucking franchise, you can't really do shit with it. You know, you can maybe pick which targets you want to model, which target areas you want to focus your advertisement from, but you don't even make your own damn commercials. And when you want to do your store layout, you got to look from a catalog that they played. You know, you don't get to do anything. It's basically a money generating machine. You know, you buy the franchise and you basically buy into the ability to make money from this pre-established model. So I'm not really even sure why we think that franchise owners, in terms of is kind of anti-entrepreneurialism. With all the mythological fake shit they tell us about entrepreneurs. Oh, entrepreneurs are innovators, they're creators, they take the risk, woo, woo, woo. And the thing about this, the lawsuit, the reason the Black franchise owners were suing McDonald's is because McDonald's was like, why don't y'all Black people sell burgers to Black folks? And they were like, McDonald's is forcing us to set up restaurants in the Black community, forcing us to hire people in the Black community, and forcing us to sell to people in the Black community. So literally the lawsuit was about them getting the hell out of the Black community and going into white folks' communities and other non-Black communities and invest their money and make their money outside of the community. So they're literally suing McDonald's to get away from Blackness. And I remember I was a radiographer, right? And when I got this job, it was in Kansas and Missouri. And we basically were a contractor where we would do psychiatric centers, nursing centers, prisons and jails, private prisons, federal prisons. And we would go into these various places to offer health services. X-rays, which is what my main thing, I would do X-rays, some EKGs, EEGs, and other contract medical service for these high at-risk population, right? And when they hired me, I was one of 2 Black people on the staff, 2 licensed radiographers and technologists on the staff. And they would send me to all the Black places. They would send me to the Black Psychiatric Center in the Black community between Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, and which is the south side of the city, all the services there. They would send me to the county jail. And, they send me to Leavenworth, to where all the black people were. And so even though like 90% of the companies they had contract with were white or predominantly white servicing, they send me to all the black places. And so one day I go into work and the other black tech comes and looks at my schedule for today. And he was like, oh, they got you going to all the black places. I wanted to protest and was mad about that. And I'm like, yo, be quiet. You think I don't know? If I'm going to be providing healthcare services, I prefer to go to black folks. I know it's in their mind, they think they're harming me or discriminating against me by having me provide medical services to the black community. But this is what I want. And this other black tech was like, I resent as a black man, having to go to the black areas. I'm like, where else would you want to go? You go to some white nursing home with some old ex-Klansmen? Every time I'm around a white person in their 80s and 90s, I'm like, I know this cracker been to a lynching or a Klan rally. So that's how black people that get good jobs and get into status, they think I haven't arrived until I'm outside. If I'm still mingling and maneuvering and moving amongst black folks, I'm suffering. I'm being dealt an injustice if I'm stuck in this black circle.
So you ain't feeling this McMass campaign, man?
I'm not crying for them. I'm not crying for the what is the BMO, Black Franchise, the Black National Black McDonald's Operators Association. I'm not gonna, put no chain in their cup, And if I think black people owning McDonald's, they get personal wealth, but they do more harm to us collectively than they do in terms of, the little scholarships they give out and shit like that. I think they attract more than they give back, which is a parasitic relationship to have with your own community.
Oh, absolutely. So the good brother,
stop eating McDonald's, stop shopping at McDonald's and Popeyes.
They got vegan ribs and vegan sandwiches now, bro. They vegan.
Well, forget everything I said in the last 5 minutes. Can you edit all that out? When are we finishing? I gotta go get a burger. I didn't think about that. Forget everything I said.
So look, the brother Andy, I think that was Andy in the comments, shared the sister who she wrote this really powerful book, Marcia Chatelain, right? So franchise, the Golden Arches in Black America. I mean, she dives into it deep. She's pretty solid. I won't advocate for her everything she does politically and say politically, but if you thinking about franchise is the solution, because the brother asked, what's the solution? You think franchise is the solution? This episode should, and definitely this book should show you that that's probably not going to work. And again, if you want that book, I have the book, PDF, free of charge. We can send it to you. You see Bill Clinton in there. And I don't know if you do. I don't know if you saw most of the show of Homeboys last week with Jared. But Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton said Homeboys, and I'm a homeboy from Arkansas, and that made that man make a soda called Homeboys, which is kind of unique.
Toni Morrison said that Bill Clinton was the first black president.
Yeah, I'm keep trying to put it out of my head that she actually
did she start that? Huh?
Did she start that? Because I remember, was she the first person to do that?
Yes, she started. And the reason she said that, one of the reasons she gave was he was raised by a single mother in poverty, which is a black thing. And one of the reasons she gave is because he ate McDonald's. And, back then, I don't remember the rhymes. Quarter pounder, stick shake, something, 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 something. I forgot it. But what it was. But, they had the McDonald's wraps and all that. And so, yes, one of the reasons Toni Morrison said that Bill Clinton was the first black president was because he ate at McDonald's regularly. And that was considered hood food.
That's crazy. That's sad that's who that was. So, real quick, again, I know I always try to invite these people on. You know how we do in these spaces. Like anybody who has anything to say they want to be a part of it, you could definitely always come through. So again, I'm gonna ask San Juan Malo again. If you want the link, I can give you the link and you can come on. So that way we can have like a real dialogue about it. But it says y'all are trivializing Black enterprises. There will always be contradictions operating with the white dominated controlled capitalism. We know this. Do you even want to respond to that? Or again, you can come on. You could come on the show.
I'm actually not trivializing Black enterprising. I am denouncing them because of the harmful impacts that they have. And enriching an individual has no direct correlation to empowering a people. I'm saying that many Black enterprises are just as predatory and hyper exploitive of the Black working classes as the white ones are. And so we have seen situations in post-colonial Africa where the African leaders simply took over the apparatus of colonial exploitation that was vacated by the whites. We saw that in Zimbabwe. We saw that in Kenya. And many of these sellout Black leaders, Mobutu Sese Seko in the Congo. So the white people set up an exploitative system, a system of exploitation that targets Black people and especially vulnerable Black communities. White people set that system up. And we eject the white people from that system. And then Black people, but we don't tear down the system. We don't dismantle the system. We just remove the white people from the system. And then we have Black people enter that system and begin to function. And then our critique of that system becomes what we used to denounce and fight against. We begin to praise and embrace.
Right.
More Black for the first time in history. Black people have always been at the left of the U.S. political spectrum. When it came to economic policies, we were the most progressive and leftist voting bloc in the United States since the Reconstruction era. Black people, for the first time in U.S. political history, moved to the right of the white masses. When Obama wanted to send troops into Syria, majority of Black people supported this decision, which was an international war crime, one of many that he committed or attempted to commit. And the white masses said no. That had never happened before in the history of the United States. So Obama, and you say I'm trivializing Black politics. Obama, being president, made Black people more regressive politically. Black people being in these franchises for these multinational corporations make us more regressive. That's why this book, Class Struggle in Africa, other book, The West and the Rest of Us, which is White Predators, Black Slavers, and the African Elite. And if you want to bring it on home, almost verbatim, you got Black Bourgeoisie. These, yes, I am not trivializing Black enterprise. I am saying that Black enterprise has historically been subversive and hostile to Black liberation, to Black empowerment. So, and the historical record backs me up. And if they want me to stop attacking and calling that out, simply change up. Start supporting Black liberation instead of subverting it. Start truly empowering Black people instead of pacifying us with this pie in the sky. Oh, what, I did it, so can you bullshit.
Right. So for the people that want the PDF, let me know, inbox me or whatever, and I'll send it to you. So again, BB Fahodihe Solutions came in, and I intently play the first clip and I intently read 27 because I know people, they say this, right? He says, Bro Amos was clear in what he advocated for, and he believed that we should not be afraid of being labeled capitalists to achieve that objective. Now, here's the interesting thing. I know people say they study Amos or read Amos, but I also know a lot of people really haven't studied this book. It's a thick book. And I know that people really wasn't paying attention to some of the lectures, because even in the lectures, he actually tell you he struggled with the concept of capitalism. And what he was kind of advocating for was more so of what he thought was a collective capitalism. And I mean, you probably know better than I, but even some of his moves when he was here, it wasn't capitalistic move. It was more cooperative type stuff. But please respond to that. And I think he commented something else that I was trying to find. He said that, and then he said something that you said, Diallo. He said, Diallo, you even said it yourself when speaking on Wise Intelligence. Wise is able to accumulate resources and get it back to the people with rap snacks than with revolutionaries in the street. So yeah, go ahead.
First thing I'll speak on, owning a business, owning a franchise does not make you a motherfucking capitalist. First of all, you can label me whatever you want, and I've been labeled everything, but capitalists own the means of production. There are no black capitalists, that I know of within the United States. So you can label us capitalism, and there may be some black capitalists out there who are in control of fundamental basic resources and the means of production. But a lot of these black people are what they call the petite bourgeoisie. They are assets and allies of the capitalist. They are not capitalists themselves. And if you are serving the interest of the capitalist class, you cannot serve both the capitalist class and the oppressed people.
Wait,
that's just, huh?
Is this dude saying like scientific Pan-Africanism is what we need in our business realm? Like, and then he's talking about capitalism.
Well, I'm just saying, in terms of us not being afraid to be a labeled capitalist, I don't think we have to be afraid of being labeled capitalist. And the basic mode of capitalism is minimal input, maximum extraction. You cannot be a revolutionary if you're oriented towards minimal input or maximum extraction. That's all the fuck capitalism is. That's what it boils down to. Profit is theft. You don't earn profit. You don't work for profit. Profit is unearned income. It is literally theft from the rape of environment and exploitation of labor. There's really no way to fucking polish this shit. And if you're fucking doing that, you are a parasite. You are an enemy of the people. You are a reactionary. You are a sellout. You are an Uncle Tom. Now, if you open a business, that neither makes you a parasite or an Uncle Tom. If you are earning your income, that doesn't. So we get confused about these terms. A lot of times we're out here doing shit thinking it's other shit when it's not the other shit. If you're showing up to work at your business that you own, you're not engaged in capitalism. Capitalism is sitting on a beach in Monte Carlo while there is a factory on the other side of the fucking world. Capitalism is Donald Trump making $1 billion off of real estate when he's never laid a brick, when he's never ran a wire, when he's doesn't know how to do carpenter. And if I showed him a level and a tape measure, he couldn't fucking tell the difference between the two. But he's a builder. That's what a capitalist is. And if you're doing that shit, you can't claim you're down for the people, because that's what's called class suicide. You can't engage in capitalism and liberation, because capitalism is subverted by liberation. You think these capitalists go around the world overthrowing liberation movements because they just hate black people? They do it because it is contrary to their economic interest. So you can't do them both. You got to pick one or the other. What a lot of these black people want to do is be able to maintain their black identity while enjoying the spoils of empire. I want a nice car. I want a big house. I want all the material luxuries of imperialism. And at the same time, I want to be able to say that I'm an African, I'm a proud black man, and all this shit. It's like Michael Jackson when he would destroy his African features and then say, I'm a proud black man. You can't be both.
Right.
If your actions contradict your ideas, or if your ideas contradict your actions, you're either lying or you're insane. And either one, you either need to get therapy or stop fucking lying. You do one or the other, because that's just the contradiction. Capitalism, from its inception, has been anti-African. It destroys ecosystems, and it is anti-African, and it is subversive and hostile to the interest of African people. And so you cannot use that to liberate yourself. It's like using acid to water your fucking crops. You're better off doing nothing.
So San Juan, you definitely could come on if you want to, and then a BB for Hodier. I'm gonna put the invite in the chat or on the screen, and you can call in a second. I want to wrap up with two more things that we wanted to share about the story, about the research. And again, all of the research, you can go throughout the show notes and go down the rabbit hole and continue to comment. And then in the second half of it, we'll get into Q&A, dialogue. And like I said, if anybody want to come on, they can join. So one of the things that was very interesting that I saw, that this pastor partnered up with the Black Donald Trump, right? So there's this person in Detroit that call himself the Black Donald Trump, and they call themselves, and they allow people to call him that. And the current mayor, which is a white man, he actually put this current mayor in office, right? Right here he said, oh, am I sharing it already? Yeah, perfect. So he says, therefore, I reach out in hopes of influencing him into running for mayor. He's talking about the current mayor, Mike Druggins. And he agreed. And I gave him a campaign office in Tower Center and a Grand River in Greenfield and donated it the maximum legal contribution, right? So again, now he support this mayor. Again, this is the guy who helped the church man get the deal and the lands and all this other stuff. So this is his guy, the deal maker. And again, he puts this person in office. But here in 2021, he's writing this letter to get rid of the man in office. Why is he trying to get rid of him in office? Because he's saying like, yo, it's time to let this dude go now because he knowingly and illegally foreclosed tens of thousands of lower income African-American homeowners for non-payment. Watch this. And with this Wayne County tax auctions, he's now given these resources and this property to new Detroiters. So it really sounds like, yo, he ain't cutting me in on the deal anymore, and now I'm mad and we need to get rid of his ass, right? Because when I take you to this next thing, you'll see that he made a bunch of money off of the auctions. So again, this is somebody who is a big component to how the church got all the land and the resources. Because if you look at this one, again, all these are in the show notes. You can go through them yourself. But he tells you the auctions are tremendous. Like he is benefiting from these auctions, how much money he's made off of all these foreclosed. But then when the mayor cut him out of the deal, he's talking about how illegal and how bad it is for black people. Again, when you see a church like this, which is an economic, again, Amos can't foresee this, and he tells you he's not a trained economist. These things are to spark dialogue. These are not solutions. So the brothers who saying, what's the solution? Obviously, Amos is telling you these are not the solutions. These are something that you can dialogue about. Go ahead.
Amos Wilson. This is the thing. If you don't know anything about Amos Wilson, this will help you ground you into his teaching. Amos Wilson said ultimately, first he went on to describe the various sources or populations who have power. He talked about, and this is in the 90s before Japan entered 2 decades of stagflation. Back when Japan, when the dragon, it used to be called the dragon economy, the Asian dragon economies. When you go back in the 90s and 80s and you look at movies like Gung Ho, or there was a Wesley Snipes movie. There were a bunch. What was that? Rising Sun with Sean Connery.
Yeah, Rising Sun.
Anyway, there was a lot of rhetoric about China and Asia taking over back then. In Japan was the China of the 90s. Like, oh, Japan's is buying all these skyscrapers. But anyway, long story short, he talked about Japan. He talked about China, rising China. He talked about India and India's elevation. And he basically said, when you look at these various countries that are becoming economically independent or becoming economic rivals of the United States and other Western countries, he said they all have basically one thing in common. And he said it's not resources, because some of those lands are resource rich, and you find lands that are resource rich where the people are impoverished, and you find lands that are resource impoverished where the people are rich, like China, which is a rock, has no agricultural land, has no natural resources. And so he said one thing, the most valuable thing a people can possess is a cohesive ideology and a cohesive agenda. That's the most valuable thing. Understanding who they are and determining for themselves how they will engage the world. He said that surpasses any material wealth, whether your land is on oil. You have nations where all around the world where nations were saying having oil in your soil is a curse because the Western powers come in and you find people literally starving to get to death on fertile land. People living in abject poverty on land that is full of crude oil. You find people having nations having high rates of homelessness, living in corrugated board houses where they are export trillions of dollars of lumber, like in Brazil. So it is understanding an African ideology, an African worldview, African social theory, and revolutionary Pan-African ideology is more valuable. And that's why our fucking oppressors will let us get all the money we want. But the moment we start moving towards Pan-Africanism without a dime in our pocket, they fucking COINTELPRO us. You can tell what's a true threat to our oppressors by how they react to it. And I know y'all like to believe that, I just saw this thing, Bill Cosby was brought down. Y'all, whenever a rich asshole, through their own hubris, gets into trouble, y'all act like the system is conspired to bring down a wealthy black man. But some of the wealthiest black people navigate this system with no problem, with hundreds of millions of dollars in liquid and hard assets. And the system don't move against them because they are assets to the systems and they are allies of our enemies.
So I'm trying to get the, I posted here, you can join right here, StreamYard.com and then join it for the two people. I think San Juan is now in agreement with you, so I'm not sure if they're disagreeing, but the other person wanted to come on. So you definitely want to come through. Any extra points or thoughts?
And I'm sorry, just to speak on that shit happens every single time. We got a guy here, Willie Wilson, who's a local multi-millionaire, very wealthy man, and he goes all over the impoverished black neighborhoods and buys free gas. He'll just pull up at a gas station on the south side. He did one a few blocks from my house where he'll pull up on the south side and go into a gas station and say, I'm buying everybody's gas. And black people come and he shows up at churches in the black community and hands out crispy $100 bills. And he runs for mayor. He's run for president. He's run for senator. He runs for every office. And his name is Willie Wilson. It's the same situation, a black kingmaker, essentially. But when you look at his ideology, he's a right-wing Republican. He voted for Trump. He supports right-wing reactionary policies and all that shit. So you have these prominent black people who say black and claim to be not only living embodiments of black excellence, but claim to have our interest at heart. But when you look at the meat and potatoes, usually when they're not selling us out, they're just doing self-serving type things that they advocate for. So we got that happening. It's not surprised this dude put this white man in power and then trying to take him out of power because the deal went sour when really the black masses had nothing or just a pawn in that.
Right. So we're going to get right to the questions here. We'll get there second, and then we'll go with BB Bahodier. Go ahead, brother.
Hey, how you guys doing?
All right.
Right on. Yeah, I'm glad to be on. Definitely a fan. Started following Brother Geechee, some of your posts on the Instagram, and I've been following Diallo for a while now.
Oh, where?
It's pretty dope. But yeah, I just wanted to articulate some of my points, especially as far as Brother Amos, because you're like, I do have a book, Blueprint for Black Power. I haven't dove into it yet. Really thick read. However, I paid attention to a lot of what he says through his lectures. Transatlantic Production, TAP, shout out to them. They have New African Mind or Waking the African Mind is like a 10-hour lecture series, just different Amos lectures. And I've always been picking his brain. And I believe he is clear. What he advocates for is it's essentially power. He even goes as far as to say everything that happens to our people is more or less because we are powerless to do anything about it. And from that, as I came to understand my reality, I see that the ones that do have power and who are able to, enact their will on this world are capitalists, are those with large corporations who influence policies, who influence different governments based on their ability to accumulate wealth and redistribute that wealth. And so even in Blueprint for Black Power, you guys were speaking earlier on the franchising model. I don't believe that the book was a book of solutions, but a set of strategies that would allow us to accumulate resources. Amos, he was a Black nationalist. He believed that we should have our own nation. He believed that we should behave as if we were a global nation and a global economy. And so even a lot of his theories and his lectures were based on how we could accumulate the resources that would lead us to power.
So real quick, yeah, I want to let Diallo go and then we can follow up with a question. But so you did say you have not dived through the book yet, the whole thing yet.
No.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Diallo.
And I'm on record saying that I in one of my presentations, I gave a list. I had all of Amos Wilson's published books, and I gave my list of my favorite from the best to the worst. And unfortunately, Blueprint for Black Power is at the bottom of the list, And if I just show, this is my favorite book by Dr. Amos Wilson, The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy. That's my favorite book by him. But you said corporations are the institutions of power, which I agree. We always look at how things are, but we seldom look at how things came to be. So first, if you say they are the power and you think that is a path, then you have to ask yourself, how did they become the power?
Easy. Exploitation, resource theft.
Okay, yes, barbarism, hyper exploitation, genocide, colonization, slavery, right? So if you're looking at them as models of power or trying to follow their model to your own power, are you prepared to engage in ecocide, genocide, enslavement, and hyper exploitation? Are you willing to do that? Because how are we going to do what they did if we don't do what they do? How are we going to get what they did if we ain't willing to do what they did?
Yeah, I do see your point. That is something that
It's not a point, it's a question.
Yeah,
I understand that. How do we get multinational corporate status or multinational corporate power while not behaving like multinational corporations?
Yeah, that's one of the things that conflicts me most, especially about my life as I see a clear path. I don't believe that we can.
So corporations are not, even though we acknowledge that they have power, we cannot model ourselves after them, join them, or mimic them in order to get Black power then, if you're not willing to engage in that path.
I mean, I'm willing to engage in that path. I believe that we can engage in that path and not have
Who are you willing to enslave?
Anyone who's not Black.
Who are you willing to colonize?
Anyone who does not, I can't even say Black. Anyone who, I would not want to colonize another group of oppressed people. I don't believe in enslaving another group of oppressed people. I would, I believe that we can engage in things. Let me finish. I believe that we can engage in things without having to, you look at Christianity. There's a lot of things that are considered a sin, but people pick and choose on what they want to look at and identify as sin. I believe that
if you're picking and choosing Christianity, you are what is called a heretic. You are not a Christian. You're not following Christianity if you're picking and choosing from Christianity. So now I'm curious, what population are you interested in, or are you willing to enslave?
Well, that's
you said anybody who's not Black, so there's a large population on the earth
yeah, there are large, but let's go back. Why do you have to follow their exact business model? How come you can't accumulate wealth through providing value, a high level of value to the masses of people? instead of using models which
I'm sorry. Okay.
I muted myself too. I didn't mean to mute myself. But real quick, give us an example of what you're talking about. Because again, franchise was one of the examples that he gave. And then as he suggested, 30 years down the road, you can see if it worked out well or not, right? So you saying, right, violence and policy is how they get and maintain wealth. But then you saying you don't really want to do the violence that they did. Why do we have to use the same measure? But you want to find another way to do it. So give us an example of you saying you're going to add value to people. Like, give us one example.
I believe that people deserve to have clean running water. We should have corporations that are able to provide.
Okay, let's stop there. Let's slow down. Yeah. So people, because again, this is something that Amos covered in this episode and the other episode. When we see a social issue that's politically created, we in then turn have an entrepreneurial agenda to solve a social issue. So people need water. Now you will sell them water? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it's an entrepreneurial, not solution to solve a social issue. The key is accumulating wealth to redistribute that wealth to areas that would benefit the liberation efforts.
So walk us through it. Walk us through it. You gave the water example. People need water. People don't have clean water. How are you going to create wealth from people lacking clean water to give back to the people?
I believe in owning the means of production. So it wouldn't be selling people water. Let me finish. It wouldn't be selling people water. It would be creating engineering and construction firms that are able to do large projects on places, large infrastructure projects in which we are able to provide clean running water for people. Like, I don't believe. Go ahead.
How are you going to do that?
Well, you have to accumulate wealth. I believe that we should first. You have to accumulate wealth.
How are you going to accumulate wealth? So again, these people got wealth through violence and policy, and you say you don't want to do those things. So which one of those?
Can I give you a cheat code? Can I give you a cheat code?
Yeah.
You know how white people got wealth?
Yeah, exploitation, resource theft, genocide.
They defined what it was. They simply define it. Power. They define wealth. So if you want to get wealth,
let me grab my phone charger.
Well, let's just say to the listeners, white people did not enter into any economic system and outcompete anyone. They came with their own economic system and they displaced the existing economic system and imposed their own economic system. They displace and impose. That's how they got wealth, So yeah, the rape and the pillage and enslavement, they brought that. But in reality, they had been doing that long before they got rich. If you look at Europe, everything they did in Africa, they had already mastered in Europe. They did everything to each other. They were doing genocide, tribalism, enslavement, mutilation and torture. And here in Chicago, they have the medieval torture museum. They had a whole industry of inventing and manufacturing torture devices long before they even knew black people existed. So yeah, they did that, but that's not how they made the money. That's just what they did even when they were broke. Right. What they do is they didn't come to America and say, well, the wealth here is measured in buffalo skins, so we're going to hunt the buffalo. They slaughtered the buffalo and destroyed the buffalo skin economy. They went to Africa and say, well, the wealth here is based on ancestry and family, and you have these different guilds where you go into the Makers Guild or the griots or scholars, and they just went and destroyed the familial and the ancestral worship and the culture. So what you should do as an African revolutionary who wants wealth, empowerment, and all that is you have to subvert capitalism, not master it. You have to undermine, displace it, and impose a system, a humane system, a just system. Not about accumulating wealth, but serving the needs of the people. Those are two opposites. That's the solution. subverting the current system, undermining the current system, and cultivating and imposing a different system. That's revolution. Black capitalism is not a revolution. It is a corruption of African people, not a liberation of African people.
So, brother, we're going to give you one more question before we send you on to homework. Since you haven't gone through the book, I need you to go through page 559 and maybe even start on that chapter, but maybe you can start on 5. Hell, this a man here. You might want to start with this chapter, the Black Church joint. So if you can start with this chapter 23, and we have some notes and show notes and links and research that you can follow one of these advice. And I would beg you to, again, because you said you didn't read it through, but I would beg you to actually study the part that we actually talked about tonight. Go through those links and then come back and see and watch it. Listen to yourself, engage with us, and then see how that, and we can continue to build after this. But I'm gonna give you one more question so we can get to some more questions, and then we can rock out. If you have another.
Before we get to the question, can I make a statement?
Sure.
All right. Yeah. Again, you will find no disagreements on my end. I do not disagree with you. As you said before, the game is power. My understanding, power is obtained through people moving to strategy. At the end of the day, people are what we need. We need to radicalize as many people as we can. But as far as I can tell, people are organized around money. So I'm not saying capitalism is a end all or capitalism is how we liberate ourselves. I'm saying we need to find ways to accumulate wealth. So when we have people, we can organize them and be able to get them to do the things we need to do. Because I've seen money get people, the proudest of us, to do things they didn't want to do, like wash toilets, like flip burgers, like work for this or that corporation. So at the end of the day, I do not disagree with you. I believe that capitalism is evil. I believe that it is something that is, it's causing what you always say, the literal life-sustaining capabilities of this planet to cease to exist. I recognize that. However, I do see that there are aspects of capitalism that are used to acquire a vast amount of wealth. And I contend that that wealth is needed to get people to organize around what we need to do.
Do you have a historical example where the wealthy you have a population who is?
I have none. There's none. I have again. That's why I said
where you pulling from that?
Huh? I'm saying that whatever we do, we would have to create it. Just because we take something, we don't have to do it we don't have to look at that model and say,
didn't you just said a Pan-African scientific? Didn't you said something about scientific?
Yeah, we need.
So if you don't, again, you coming up with an analysis, you said scientific, then you don't even have an example of it?
No, I'm saying that what we need, it does not currently exist, because if it existed, we would have done it. We need to create something entirely new. I believe that we can
analysis based off of when you say create something new, you just saying pull it out the sky or have actually analysis of something? Because
no, I'm saying we should look at models used to generate a lot of wealth, but make sure that those who think like we do use that wealth around the needs of the people.
Can you give me an example where people who are able to amass or accumulate wealth were actually assets and servants of the interest of the masses of the people?
Bob Marley, he used his wealth to help fund the Zimbabwe War of Liberation, either lending his voice in the song Zimbabwe or using his money to provide resources, arms to the Zimbabweans to fight.
Okay.
All right. So appreciate you. All right, we got a couple more questions. I want to make sure that I grab a few.
Oh, can I just speak to, because it's Preacher-Preneur and about how the Black church can be utilized in our empowerment. Let me just say this. Dr. Bobby Wright said, when we were brought here and enslaved and under Jim Crow, white people didn't give us good food. They didn't give us adequate shelter. They didn't give us education. They outlawed our education. And then when we were finally allowed education, they gave us substandard schools, substandard food, substandard housing, tattered clothing. He said, but they gave us the best religion in the country. So why did they give us open and free access to religion and the best religion available while denying us literally every other element of human existence and dignity? I don't think we can win with the church. I don't think there's anything coming from the church but pacification and exploitation. Even when the church is opening schools, and when I say the church, I mean all religious institutions, the Nation of Islam, any type of supernatural based organizing. African people, we have to be secular in our organization, be secular in our strategizing, and be secular in our liberation. You can have your personal spirituality, you can have your personal truth. And if you need your light bill paid and you can go up in a church and they paying light bills or they giving out, tofurkey on Thanksgiving, extract all you can from the church, but just know we will not find liberation in anybody, any alien belief system.
So you are declaring that this economic advice right here is not duplicatable, and we definitely should not follow that.
And I think Amos Wilson did say that you have to evaluate. He was an admirer of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He admired its economic development. But I literally live under the umbrella of influence of the NOI and all this mythology about how they clean people up and all this nonsense. It is proven to be a failed endeavor. You can't. What else? Put in my notes. We just can't get free from an alien ideology. Has never liberated anybody. Oh, so alien faith is a weak foundation. That's what I wrote in my notes. Alien faith is a weak foundation. And if it wasn't true, I wouldn't be saying it. If we could adopt and Africanize some alien religion, I'd be the first one. It just doesn't work. We can't Africanize Christianity, Islam, and we definitely can't Africanize capitalism.
Right. So how about people in the chat? Do you believe that buying land and putting things like McDonald's on there to do franchising, you think that's a viable option?
It's not a viable option for liberation. It's a viable option for to make money. I mean, if you need to make money, people always accuse me of being pro-poverty, which is ironic because I'm anti-capitalism, and even capitalist economists will acknowledge that the more capitalism you engage in, the more you expand poverty, because capitalism literally in its motto concentrates wealth. Like the brother was saying, the role of capitalism is to accumulate and concentrate wealth. And if you have a limited supply of something and you give it all to one person, where does it leave everyone else? It leaves them with a deficit. So actually, the people out here talking about economic empowerment, Black entrepreneurialism, they are the ones who are pro-poverty. Anti-capitalists are the only anti-poverty people that we have operating in our societies. If you are pro-capitalist, you cannot eliminate poverty with capitalism, because you eliminate capitalism as you eliminate poverty. It's just, it doesn't work, and it has never worked. In fact, the reason why poverty is being reduced is simply because the NGOs, the economic NGOs, IMF, World Bank, who do the poverty measures, they simply keep lowering the bar for what poverty means. It used to be you were considered to be impoverished if you made less than $7 a day. You were impoverished. Then they moved it down to $3.50 a day. And now it's like $1 a day is impoverished. So only thing they do is redefine what poverty is in order to reduce poverty. They do not reduce poverty by justly distributing the world's wealth and resources.
Right. So by all means, y'all get your questions in as we wrap up. I wanted to read a quote from one of our brothers, our comrade Yusuf Bunchy Shakur, who's a Detroit native and knows Detroit and knows this pastor. And the situation. He said, it's a Black church with a lot of history. The previous pastor is respected in Detroit and around throughout the country, because obviously that preacher went to he went to Harvard Divinity School. His son, who is the current pastor, is trying to fill his father's shoes. He is not his father. The congregation served mostly middle-class black folks, as Amos told you. He said they don't have like a radical tradition, but they have done things for the people in some kind of fashion. So make sure, again, if you have any questions, I will definitely get those in. Another thing, again, so I believe reading this brother, following up his moves, Amos actually contradicts him a couple times in this book and all his other books, his lecture, about some of the things that this brother would say. But there's one thing that, again, this is in the show notes, but when he was at Harvard Divinity School, he asked this James Luther Adams person, he says, Dr. Adams, will you please tell me what's your opinion is the hope for the world today? And he said, and this white-skinned, white-haired man looked me straight in the eyes, and he says, the hope of the world today is African-American preachers. And he says, now I want to change that to African-American church. So this pastor changed it from preachers to church. He says, I think that's what he meant. But imagine you going to this Harvard school where this white scholar is telling you this. He's like 90 years old, and he's celebrated in his white institution. And he has power, privilege, so forth. We don't call him privilege. And then he says that when this man told him that, it's kind of shook him to the core. He says, this white man is saying to me, and he says, the hope for the world wasn't white wealth, wasn't white culture, wasn't white America, wasn't white institutions and white Republican parties or corporate America, GM, IBM, all these other things. So he was just so impacted by this white Harvard man telling him that the answer or the solution, the hope for the world is the black.
Let me translate that conversation for you.
Go ahead.
Boss, who gonna clean up this mess you made? Well, Rufus, you's gonna clean it up. That's what that meant. That's the translation. Black folks gonna clean up the mess white folks made. Fuck that shit.
He was moved by it. But again, I know, and if any of y'all serious, about Amos, y'all know Amos wouldn't go for that shit. He'd be like, come on, But anyway.
No, I don't want us to be the hope for the world. But if white folks want to take this church off our hands, please take it back. Let it be. Take all the black preachers and all the black churches. Take them off.
They don't see the logic.
And the amount of dysfunction and poverty in the community is directly proportional to the number of churches.
Yeah. Ross said it's a lottery. Only one or two gonna get it. But if you don't play, you'll never get it. So too many participate in hopes of becoming a winner. Yeah, Amos talked about that in his book. I mean, hey, did you read it? I mean, I know you probably saw the lectures and stuff, but the book that he published posthumously, did you put that in your lineup? It's the newest one that.
Oh, that's no, I didn't get that one. No.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was actually good. It was pretty solid. Again, we arguing about his economics. I felt like he really didn't have to talk much about economics. This brother asked, how viable is infiltrating the church? And you actually kind of already answered this. Go ahead.
Yeah. I actually, have heard and seen that, but it's really it's better to try to extract people from the church. It's better to pull Africans out of the church than to have revolutionaries go into it. I just think it's a more effective strategy. The church is too well rooted and too well established of an institution for you to go there as an individual. And I've gone into, and hell, we need conscious African people to go into conscious African organizations and infiltrate we need y'all to infiltrate Pan-African organizations and get them on task, not reactionary organizations. So I don't think it's viable. At least I haven't seen anyone do it successfully.
I think we talked about this before, like this concept of not trying to infiltrate or convert them, but could you work with them without attacking them? And I think remember one of the conversations we had is like, if we working on some land sovereignty, when we come here and we grow this food. Don't try to save me, and I won't talk whatever. We're just gonna grow this food. Can you speak to some of that bashing them or whatever?
I accept and embrace Africans who are suffering with the delusion of Jesus Christ dying for their sins and being their Lord and Savior, and Africans who are suffering from the delusions that Muhammad, was divinely inspired to last prophet. I do support Pan-Africans who have those delusions, but I'm not willing to lie to them or my community about those institutions. So that's just, it's out of respect and love. So yeah, you can be join organizations. I'm willing to work with Christians. I'm willing to work with Muslims towards goals, but I'm not willing to bite my tongue about colonizing, enslaving, genocidal death cults that have infected our community. It's as simple as that. And when you come to work amongst Africans, we do what Malcolm said. You leave your religion at home, but you're not going to come into a gathering of African people with this alien concepts and not be challenged. So yes, if you show up to dig the trench, and you're there to dig the trench, and even if you want to go off and face down, ass up into the east, and pray before you come and dig the trench, I'm not going to come over and snatch your little prayer rug out from under you. But I mean, my thing is, I have as much tolerance and respect for alien religions as those alien religions have had for African culture and African spirituality, which is, next to none. So as long as if you're not willing to deal with reality, and again, if any Christian or Islamic scholar wants to come and say, well, I'm wrong, I'm willing to hear their evidence. But we need to do as Malcolm said, leave your religion at home. When I show up to the group, I don't come and snatch pork rinds out of people's mouth. I'm a vegan, and I've been a vegan for 30 years, and it pains me to see people eating these animals and abusing these animals. But I know when it's work to be done, I know people ain't trying to go vegan and all that, even though that's my gospel that I live by or whatever. But I know when it's time to talk vegan, when it's time not to. And if I'm talking veganism, when people tell me shut the hell up with that tree hugging shit, I can't get mad, because there's a time and a place.
So I think the answer to no is this, because you already said no to that already.
Can you decolonize religion? What does that even mean? Yeah, you can decolonize it by exiting it. If every African stopped following Islam and Christianity, the religion will be decolonized, because the colonized people are no longer colonized when they stop worshiping the aliens. So yes, the way you decolonize Christianity is by exiting the faith. Exit and shun the faith, and that's one less colonial subject. You can't be a colony if you ain't got subjects, right? So as long as there's Black Christians, there are African Christians, then Christianity is a colonial religion. So if you love Christianity so much, leave it the blood clot alone, and then you will make it less racist and less colonial.
All right, y'all. So we've been at it enough, and I think everybody will agree that buying a piece of land to let McDonald's and KFC come sell chicken and sandwiches to your people is not going to liberate us. It might put some money in people's pockets. It might help individual Black folks, but I haven't seen it, and you can check through the show notes, and I haven't seen that even those Black franchise owners are paying their employees a livable wage. I haven't seen in the zip code that church has thrived in a place where the poverty has decreased in the whole city.
It's decreasing because the poor people are being ousted.
Well,
they're not decreasing poverty by redistributing the resources. The community isn't improving by improving the lifestyle and the status of Black people. They are displacing and ejecting the poor, which is a different form of development, but that's what's happening there according to their own stats.
Also, this is in the show notes too. So they did a deal with the Presbyterian Church, and they got an old folks home there, but it's an old folks home for high class, high income old folks. But there is a report that we know our research team, they be digging in some shit, y'all. I'm telling you right now. And when they found out that one of your people over there getting paid $400,000, right? So there's a white man on that payroll. If you can see this, Roger. If you look at Roger Myers, he's like the VP for the I'm trying to zoom. He's the VP for but his salary $454,000, right? So obviously he making some money off of the deal. I don't know who else making money off of the deal, but that partnership looked kind of janky. Like he said, it's a partnership with the Presbyterian Church, but really the Presbyterian senior living space is a corporation that got spaces all over the place. And what he did was let them use the land per se. Not only that, oh damn, my bad, y'all. I don't want to take y'all one place. So y'all didn't know I was going to take y'all on a field trip. We're going to a field trip to one of the church properties. So let me pull this up. If you want to respond to that big salary, you can, but I need to take them to a field trip.
Same. I just have to say, there's never been a population that came under colonialism and enslavement and oppression that was liberated by the elites within their group. Now, the economic elites. There have been revolutions that have been founded and led by scholars, that have been founded and led by laborers, have been founded and led by militants, but the elites of the group, there's never been a people who, house slave or what they used to call them colonial administrators. It just doesn't happen. Those people are always, tend to be. So whenever a Black person succeeds within capitalism, and I know this is going to break a lot of y'all hearts, whenever a Black person becomes a multimillionaire or successful, we have to look at them with suspicion and contempt. And not just for ourselves, but for our own good. A lot of these wealthy Blacks that y'all love so much, y'all create a psychological situation in them where they deteriorate. Will Smith, Michael Jackson, you look at these wealthy, successful Black individuals and they lose their goddamn minds. Bill Cosby. So if the Black community really wants to appreciate the successful Blacks, if we begin to engage them with suspicion and contempt, and then thus making them not just earn white money, but it should be harder to earn Black admiration and trust than it is to earn white money. And if we created a situation like that, we would be able to have these successful, brilliant, talented, genius Black people like Jesus actually serve the interest of our community and use their resources and talent in our interest. But worshiping and praising and celebrating these Black bourgeoisie harms us collectively, and we see too many generations harms them individually.
So Diallo encouraged me to be COINTELPRO. So what we did was we found out that they got a house in the church name for $3 million. That's how much this house right here worth.
That's chicken scratch. Look at BLM houses are double that. they hustling backwards,
yeah,
man.
They ain't even getting paid now.
BLM like, oh, that's monkey shit.
As you circle a block though, you might notice that house probably like the cheapest house on the block. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to circle the block right quick. And this little white girl named Sheila. She don't want to be a part of the interview. So she didn't want us to dang, what's going on? Why it ain't going faster? She didn't want us to interview her, so we just, we're gonna blur her face out. That's my homegirl Sheila. But dog, some of these houses is huge, and look, they lawn a little raggy right there too, so they ain't taking care of their lawn, but these people are. So they probably about to get kicked out of the neighborhood anyway, bringing the neighborhood value down. Damn it. It's going too slow, y'all. I don't feel like. Wait, do I do like?
This is how they living.
It's moving. Yeah, look. Boom. Look at this house. God. So yeah, these are their neighbors. Their neighbors got bread. I don't know. It might be a parsonage though. If you look the way it's set up, it might be for the Reverend Junior to stay in.
Yeah. And
So
if they ain't paying no taxes on it if the church owns it.
yeah, that too. Yeah, man. So if you think being a preacher entrepreneur or preacher-preneur is conducive to Black liberation, your ass can't have one of these $3 million house or $10 million house.
Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of trouble getting through that eye of that needle. Even if he's not riding a camel, he's gonna have a lot of trouble.
All right, man. Yeah. So any of the rest of the links, y'all can go through the show notes and y'all can have fun in there and find out maybe something if you want to agree, disagree, keep arguing, do that. Any last words before we chime off and close out with Dr. Amos again telling you why it's important to study the work. Brothers talking about scientific and all this other stuff. Study the work and follow it.
Well, I wore my Amos Wilson. You can't even see. I wore my Amos Wilson T-shirt today.
Yeah.
And shout out to you wearing our African World Order logo shirt.
Yeah.
I'm a capitalist. I has me a business. I was a capitalist too. But I Amos Wilson, I probably discovered him when I was like 15 years old, and he's had a phenomenal impact on my life. He had passed away just before I moved to New York, but I was still able to, greatly benefit from his insights and intellect. But Amos Wilson would be the first to say, we're not supposed to deify our scholars. They should be as open to critique, evaluation, and reevaluation as anyone. So, we can't, begin to develop these lock-in, like these are Bibles and things of that nature. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm very grateful for the invitation and the opportunity. So thanks. Absolutely,
man. You're always welcome back. We're going to be going through all of them. I think it's probably like 20 of them that I did. One of the, again, I said this last episode, one of the most tragic franchise stories is Larry Lundy. So when we get to Larry Lundy, I hope y'all stick around and check it out. We will talk about a Milwaukee's Bucks owner, Reginald F. Lewis. I mean, there's tons of people that he suggested in there as economic examples. So like I said, Diallo, you're always welcome back, and we'll have different people on different times, and we'll close out like that. So appreciate you. Appreciate y'all. Shout out to the chat. Thank y'all for being there, and keep commenting.
Right. Why are
and
we
go out,
faced with these same problems again and again? Why do they never end? Because, ladies and gentlemen, ultimately the problem is not an economic problem so much as it is the problem of white domination of African people. That's the issue. This is the reason why I tell people you must study the psychology of domination even before you study the psychology of racism. Understand that. I had one young man who's so happy he's at NYU. He said, oh, I'm learning so much, and I'm so happy. I'm in this class in economics. I said, well, now, why are you in that class? And they doing all these circles and curves and, cost and all these kind of figures, which Negroes think are magic signs for making money. You see, so they think if they learn all this voodoo, that they're going to come out and be like the white folk. But remind that professor that the American economy is not ultimately based on the management skills of American management. It's not based on the organization of American corporations. What ultimately is it based on? Upon the murdering of Indians and the stealing of their lands. So that the economic course essentially is a course in how the booty is going to be divided among American people. It all goes over what? Gold and salt, and who won, and over trade routes and other things. And people went to war and took those things from one and another. And those who gained control over them then built empires and nations and so forth as a basis of that. Not just studying economics 101 and business administration. But you got to learn real history. You got to learn a history that goes beyond just the celebration of African heroes and the celebration of African culture. And he shifts his visions and is not afraid to change his mind and go against his prior opinions when that reality suggests that those opinions were wrong. You have to wake